Welcome to the Gentleman Project Podcast. I'm Corey Moore.
And I'm Kirk Chugg. This morning, we've got Brady Murray in the studio, and Brady and I have been friends for a number of years now. We've crossed paths multiple different ways, and I've always been impressed with Brady and his positive attitude and the things that he brings to life. He's a natural leader, one of the youngest managing partners in his company in the country's history. And I can see why people gravitate towards Brady and why he's in that position, because he's great at building teams and getting people behind him. I think we can all learn a lot today from Brady, and we've asked him to be on the podcast to share some of his insights on life and being a gentleman.
Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, thanks, Brady. Tell us a little bit about yourself so that everybody knows who you are. Tell us about your family, kind of where you grew up, and what makes Brady Murray Brady.
Yeah, of course. Background is I grew up in the budding metropolis of Preston, Idaho. Very proud of that and thankful for that. I have 7 beautiful children, and Andrea and I have been married for almost 19 years.
Cool. And you have a team, professionally under you of how many people?
Yeah, we have a great firm. There's around 55 of us here in Utah currently for financial advisors. And then part of our firm, there's over 200 in the West.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about why you got into that business and some of your background.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I grew up outdoors. I spent a ton of time outdoors fishing and exploring the mountains around Preston. And my family always said, you're going to live outdoors. You're going to work in something outdoors. And I never wore a tie. I never wore a shirt and tie. All growing up, I hated it. And so I had a tremendous experience on a mission in Peru. And I got back from that and I said, you know what? I don't think I'm going to pursue a career in the outdoors necessarily like my family thought, but I really want to do something that was very similar to what I experienced in Peru. I love that idea of being able to help individuals to be able to change their lives and make great decisions, and decisions that ultimately would affect generations. And so I searched long and hard for that and was fortunate to have a great mentor at Utah State that introduced me to the financial advising career. And it was just like the work that I was doing in Peru. And so I pursued it, and that's essentially what I've been doing ever since.
So what, 19, 20 years
2003.
Now?
Man, you're dating me. Holy smokes. So yeah, coming up 18 years now.
Tell us a little bit about your kids.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got a unique situation with our family. My daughter is 15, and she was born in, what would that be, 2005, and everything was fantastic. And then shortly thereafter, we were expecting our son. And, I love and was so excited to have a daughter, and I was so excited to have a son. I grew up playing a ton of sports. You kind of have to in Preston in order for them to field a team. And so football, basketball, baseball, we did all of it. And I just had these visions of what my son would be able to experience as an athlete. And I had thought of all the great adventures that we'd be able to go on outdoors, hunting and fishing and doing the things that we love. And so excited for Nash to be able to be born. I'll never forget the day when he was born. It was kind of funny. My wife woke me up it was about 2 a.m. And with those infamous words, she said, "I think it's time." And I'm like, "Time to have our baby?" She's like, "Yes." She's like, "I'm having some strong contractions." And she goes, "Grab our stuff. You may want to just jump in and grab a shower. It's going to be a long day." So I hurry and jump in the shower. I come out, and she is in full-blown labor right there on the bed, right?
Oh, boy.
And so I do what any kid from Preston, Idaho would do. I ran to the garage, I grabbed my Leatherman and my headlamp, and I got ready to deliver this kid, right? Fortunately, the contractions passed, and we were able to get to the hospital, and it was just a few short hours later, I had my little boy right there. And I'm looking at him, and I'm taking pictures and making a video and just relishing in that moment. But I remember the doctor and the nurses were super quiet, and they were kind of whispering back and forth, and it almost seemed like they had a concern. And so I'm just watching, and it was a few minutes after Nash was born. The doctor came over to me, and he put his arm around me, and he said, "Brady, we believe Nash has Down syndrome." That was the first time that had been told to me. And I was scared. I wasn't sure what that meant for my son. I was worried about his health. I was worried about what that meant. I was worried about just what life was going to be like now. And then I got super scared because I realized that what I knew about our son, my wife did not. And I was so scared how she was going to react. And so it took me a few minutes. I was very emotional. I gathered myself and I went over to the bed where Andrea was at, and I knelt down and I whispered in her ear. I said, Andrea, the doctor told us that they think Nash has Down syndrome. And she didn't skip a beat. It didn't affect her at all. She smiled and she said, great, where's my boy? I want to hold him. And I knew from that moment right then that it was going to be okay. And in fact, not just okay, but this was special. This was something that was better than anything that I would have imagined. And fast forward now 13 years, and that has absolutely been true. He is a rock star, and he has opened up so many doors and experiences for our family that I wouldn't trade it for the world. In fact, I've had people ask me, it's funny when they ask me this, but they say, if you could, would you like make it so Nash doesn't have Down syndrome or didn't have Down syndrome? I say, no way. That's my boy's superpower.
Yeah.
Right. That's my boy's superpower. So it's been a tremendous blessing. So that was number 2. And then we had Ridge. He's my 11-year-old now. And then we had Mason. He's my 6-year-old. And then we actually adopted another child that has Down syndrome from China, Cooper. And Cooper is 9. So we got him when he was 4. He's been with us for 5 years now. And so that's 5. And I know you guys are like, well, you said 7. So the 2 cabooses are actually 2 little girls that we have been fostering for over 18 months now, 19 months. And we've had some very special experiences with that. And in fact, their mother just asked us if we would adopt those 2 little girls. And so we're in the process of that. So that gives us 7. And I've been telling Andrea, I'm like, look, even in Utah, 7 is weird, right? So like families have a lot of kids here, but 7 still puts us over into that weird category. But hey, it is what it is.
Well, you've got to tell us a little more about this because going from Nash, your son, to another adopted child, to now 2 foster kids, how did that come about? Like, where did that happen? You know, how did that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. By no means did Andrea and I get married 19 years ago and say, all right, this is exactly how this is going to be played out. And in fact, I remember it was actually a number of years. It took us, I think, almost 4 years to have Brinley. And we wanted to have children about a year after we were married. And so there was a number of years that was just hard. And Andrea said, maybe we can potentially adopt. And I'm like, I'm open to that. I wasn't quite ready for that. And she actually suggested that we do foster care at that time. And I'm like, no way. I'm not open to that. And so that was, 18, 19, about 17 years ago that initial conversation started. But what I've learned, and as I look back at my life, everything that I would say I hold the most cherished, and that are those experiences that I would say have pushed me and got me way out of my comfort zone, is when I was willing to listen to just that very inner voice in my heart and just in my mind that prompts me and encourages me to do hard things. And so all of that really came from following that. And in fact, you look at Cooper, like that's not logical, like for us to go and adopt another special needs kid. Like I've shared, like we love Nash and he's the man, but like, guess what? It's not easy. And so like Nash was in diapers till he was almost 8. And that was horrible. Like that's like man poop going right there, you know? And so, and there's frustrating times with Nash. And so, in 2000 what would that have been 5 years ago? So 2015, 14, when Andrea and I had this impression and this thought that maybe we should adopt a child with special needs, like that wasn't logical. And that got me way out of my comfort zone to sign up for that one voluntarily. But, maybe in a little bit we can get into like the inspiration around the whole adoption and Down syndrome thing. Yeah, but there was definitely some things leading up to that.
I'd love to have everybody hear that story of why you decided to do that, where that voice came from, and the experience behind starting the charity work that you do.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm a firm believer that we are all temporary stewards of those resources that we've been entrusted. And when I say resources, I mean our time, I mean our financial resources, I especially mean our talents and how we spend our time. And I believe that someday this will be a positive thing, we'll get to give an accounting as to what we did with our time, with our resources, with our talents. And for a number of years in 2010, 2011, I felt strongly like I was supposed to do more, like I needed to do more. And I would tell Andrea this, and she's like, look, honey, we've got 3 kids that are under the age of 5, 1 special needs. You are on the road all the time traveling for work. And like, we are extremely busy. Like, I respect that you want to do more, but like, we're tapped out right now. And I remember clearly, we lived in Boise at the time, and I would drive to Utah a lot. And on that just special place in Idaho where it's all desert, I just was emotional multiple times and feeling like I need to do something more, like I need to help more people, or I need to do something more. And so I pondered that. I prayed about that. I sought that out. And I felt that for a couple of years until one day I finally got the answer, and I knew what more was for me at that time. And so we were very involved with the Down syndrome community, and we went to an event. And in that event, there was a friend that had said, Brady, I got to share something with you. I've been researching this. This is crazy. He said, did you know that when a kid is born with a special need like Down syndrome in developing countries, that family abandons that kid and they put them into an orphanage, or they oftentimes just leave them on a street corner. And they go to this orphanage, and then he goes, and then it gets worse. That kid's there for 4 or 5 years in this orphanage with other kids, and then they age out, and they take that kid to an adult mental institution.
At age 6.
At age 6. And he said, and Nash was 4 at the time, he's like, can you believe this? And he had a son that was 5. He said, can you believe this? Like, can you imagine our boys in an adult mental institution in a developing country and what that looks like? And like, it just struck me. So I went and I researched this, and I found pictures of these kids that are 7, 8, 9 years old that weigh 40 pounds, that are bedridden, crib-ridden, that have Down syndrome. And I'm seeing in their eyes the same look and that feel and that love that I see with Nash looking back at me. And I also learned a lot of these kids die, like pretty dang quick after being transferred. And so I thought, like, we got to do something about this. Like, we can help these guys. And so I started to research more, and I actually found out that there were families that adopt these kids, right? That are actually ready and willing to adopt these kids. The challenge is the financial cost of adoption from an international standpoint. It's about 30 to 40 grand. And for most families to come up with 40 grand is just not in the cards. So Andrea and I, it was November of 2011, we said, look, let's find a kid in one of these orphanages. Let's start fundraising for this kid, and let's try and raise as much as we can and see if that's a way to bridge the gap for these kids to be able to be adopted. I'm like, sure, let's do it. So we told all our family, like, don't buy us presents, donate to this charity or donate to this cause. And we actually found a beautiful little boy, Eli, who was in Lithuania, and we inquired about him, and they said, this is the first time anybody's inquired about him since he's been here. He's 4. He's never had an inquiry. In fact, I don't even know if he's eligible for adoption is what we're gathering, right?
Jeez.
So I learned a very valuable lesson that Christmas. I learned that if we allow ourselves to get caught up in a cause that is bigger than ourselves, we will witness miracles. And we witnessed a miracle. Within 30 days, we had raised just shy of $20,000 for Eli. We took that money, we advertised, that we had this as an adoption grant. And less than 30 days later, a family came forward and said, that's our boy. We're going to adopt him. We've wanted to do this. We couldn't make it happen, though, financially, but we can do it now. This family is in Indiana. They went and they brought Eli home. By the end of the year, he was home, and I've held this boy in my arms. In fact, I've got a great video of him dancing for an event that we did just recently, and he's been home now for 8-9 years. I think he's almost 14 years old, and he is an active contributing member to this family. And I will always say, like, individuals will say, what you're doing is so amazing for these kids. And I'll say, you're right. It is amazing what we're doing for these kids. But the biggest blessing of all of this is not the kid getting a family. It's that family that's getting that kid. That's the biggest blessing, and we've seen this time and time again. So that went down in the end of 2011. And again, back to this desire to do more. Like, I felt that, and I'm like, this is it. This is what we're going to do. We're going to go save these kids. So Andrea and I started trying to get creative on, like, how are we going to do this? What's the best way to do this? And she said, I've got a great idea. She said, why don't you run an Ironman triathlon? So swim 2.4 miles, bike 112, and then finish off running a marathon all in a day, right? Why don't you go run an Ironman triathlon and be able to raise funding for one of these kids? Like, use that as a platform for awareness. So let me pause right there. Like, I had expressed a desire to maybe someday, try something like that. And I had dabbled in little endurance triathlons, the kind that you like swim to the end of the pool, you ride your bike around the block, and then you run to the end of the street type triathlons. But like, the thought of doing a full Ironman, that just wasn't in the cards. And so I looked at her and I said, well, maybe you should do an Ironman triathlon. She's like, no, think about it. And so I thought about it, and it took me about a week, and I thought, you know what? Like, if doing one of these Ironmans gives me an experience like I had with Eli and help one of these kids find a home, I'm going to do it. And so I started training. And remember what I said, that when you allow yourself to get caught up in a cause that is bigger than yourself, you will witness miracles. And then shortly thereafter, I witnessed another miracle. So I'd been training 3 or 4 months. And it now came time to decide which Ironman I was going to do. And there's 100 Ironmans that are out there throughout the world. And in essence, you can just sign up and go and do one of these things.
Yeah.
On all of them except for one. And the one that you can't just go sign up for is the Ironman World Championship in Kona, Hawaii. And you guys have probably seen, oftentimes they'll feature this inspirational stories of athletes doing this on NBC. And that was kind of my introduction to that Ironman. But that Ironman, you just don't sign up for, right? You got to be a professional triathlete, or you got to be a Kennedy, basically, to get into that one. And I was neither. And so I was trying to decide which Ironman I was going to do when I got a phone call one day. And this individual said, you don't know me, Brady. My name is Rob, but we have a lot in common. I have a son who has Down syndrome. I'm an Ironman triathlete. And it sounds like you want to be an Ironman, and you have a son with Down syndrome. He said, he said, also, I am the CEO of the presenting sponsor of this year's Ironman World Championship. So this was in 2012. And he said, I would like to invite you to come to Kona, Hawaii and race in the Ironman World Championship. And we're going to tell your story about these kids to the world on NBC. And I remember I hung up, and I was just so emotional, because I kept thinking, like I know when I allow myself to get caught up in a cause, I was going to witness miracles, but like, how do you plan this?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do you say, I'm going to go do this, so this will happen? Like, you don't. And so I did. And in October that year, I raced in the World Championship, and I finished it. And I loved it, and I was so excited about it. And a month later, they featured that story on NBC, and from there it blew up. And so where we are right now, we started a formal nonprofit organization called Racing for Orphans with Down Syndrome. Acronym is RODS, RODS.org. And so far, we've been able to save 58 children that are now home with their families since that time.
Incredible.
So it's been a tremendous run. it's been a special thing for sure.
Incredible.
I got chills all over when you told that story. How many kids are out there? I mean, 58 kids, that's amazing. And I didn't know about this till you told me. So, I wasn't very aware, quite frankly. How many kids are there and how can someone get involved in this in rods?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so currently we've got 116 children right now that we are aware of that we're actively trying to fundraise for, and trying to help these children. And we work one child at a time. And so I learned something in the past where an individual said, relationships are built one-on-one. And I thought a lot about that. And I thought this is very applicable to our organization. That instead of trying to go and save 116 kids right now that we're aware of, we're going to try and save one. And in fact, we're doing an event right now. It's called the 321 event. This month is World Down Syndrome Month, or World Down Syndrome Day on March 21st. And we posted a video on our website where we had many of our past RODS orphans that are home with their families and their siblings dancing to this song, and they tear it up. Like, people with Down syndrome love to dance, right? And then we are in contact with an orphanage in Asia, and so I have to be sensitive not to share extreme details, but an orphanage in Asia that we have worked very closely with, and you will see on there multiple children right now that we got dance video of 2 weeks ago that are in their orphanage, dancing to this song, that are 4 and 5 years old, that we're trying to find a family for. And so those are the kids right now that we're trying to save, those little kids in that video right now. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done for sure.
You adopted again.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Why?
And so we had 4 children, right? And Nash was doing fantastic, and we felt in those quiet moments like maybe we should adopt, and we weren't in a position where we were going to ever have a child naturally, right? No child's going to be born into our family, because Andrea had some complications with Mason, and that ship had kind of sailed. And so we thought, maybe we should adopt. And we got thinking about that, and I thought this would be pretty cool. I'd love to adopt a typical child, and let's explore that. And as we started down that path, I'll never forget one morning, I had that thought come in my mind of, you should adopt another child with special needs. And I'm like, no, I wasn't ready for that. And I sat on it for a few days, and I talked to Andrea about it, and she said, you know what, I was thinking the same thing. And I thought, you know what, we need to do our due diligence. We need to seek this out and see if this is the right thing. And sure enough, when we opened up our hearts to that, it absolutely was the right thing. And so we started to explore and decide where we wanted to adopt from. And Cooper was, we were led to Cooper, and we found Cooper, and he was in an orphanage in Tianjin, China. And I learned about this little guy, and they found him on a street corner. Yeah. And they found him on a street corner when he was about 6 months old, is what they guessed, right? And so when we went and we got Cooper, so we went to China and we got Cooper, and he's with us. And I felt so strongly that we needed to go back to that street corner, right? We need to go back there with him, with his mom and dad, right? And we found it. We went back to the street corner where he's at, and we've got a picture in his room hanging up on the wall that shows us with him, with his family, there at the place where he was abandoned. And so it's something that I'll share about this. When we got home, it was about a month later. We got home in April. It was a month later. It was Mother's Day. And in that morning, that Sunday morning, it was early. I love to get up early and just spend some alone time. And I remember that morning I was just sitting there pondering and thinking, and for quite some time I had felt some animosity towards Cooper's mom. I thought, how could she abandon him, right? And leave him on that corner, right? And I had felt some anger built up, and I was pondering that. And it was such a special experience. I felt in my mind, and I had clarification and clarity come, that number one, in China, you can't give up a child for adoption. It's illegal, right? And so in the past, it's been one child per family. And there's a lot riding on that child, right? And so you can't just say, I'm going to give this child up for adoption, because you'll go to prison. And so I got clarity that she didn't just abandon him. That was something she had to do, and it was the only way. And the second thing that came to me was that this was the most selfless act that she has ever done in her life. And she knew it was what she was supposed to do. And I felt so strongly at that time that at some point in time, whether in this life or the next, I'm going to get to hold that lady in my arms and thank her for being so willing to give up her son, knowing that it would work out, right? And it was such a tender mercy to be able to have that. And I've actually felt that for a long time. In fact, you go to our foster daughters that we're fostering right now that I had shared, naturally you would have, not animosity, but you'd have reservations towards their parents. Like, they lost their kids. Like, they made bad decisions. But as I've pondered that, like, that's not how those kids are in their parents' eyes. Like, those parents are heroes. Like, they're their parents.
Yeah.
And so with our foster daughters, that relationship with their mother has been wonderful, because we've made her a hero. We've made her what she is in these children's eyes over the last 18 months as we fostered them. That mom has some challenges, but mom's wonderful. She gave you life, and your name is after mom, and sharing just in regards to their heritage. It's been a tremendous experience in having that with these kids.
Well, I'm learning a lot about, having big ideas and then following through with them, because I love that when you get caught up in a cause, you see miracles happen. You need to print that and hang it on a wall somewhere.
You will.
So you had 5 kids. You have 2 guys with superpowers.
That's right. I like it.
So did it happen again to you? Like, what brought you guys to the point that you were open to the idea of fostering again? Because you'd thought about it early in your marriage. Yeah. Now you've got 5 kids, full family, plenty to do. What is there another story behind how you guys ended up fostering these little girls?
Yeah, definitely. So we had 5 and 2 special needs, and we're like, we're good. Like, we're tapping out.
Yeah.
We did it. And we were in Florida at a conference for my work. And while I was at meetings, they had all of the spouses they invited to a brunch, and they had a guest speaker there. And this speaker was the author of the book, 3 Little Words. And it was basically a book about her growing up in the foster system. And Andrea attended that, and she came away from that, and she grabbed me at the end of the day and said, "You've got to read this book. I want to foster somebody." And I'm like, no way, honey. And in fact, if you remember, she had brought that up before, and like, that was a hard no for me. Like, fostering was a hard no for me. And in fact, I was pretty close to that. I'm like, we've got our children, we've got our family, and that was it. And so, just as Andrea does, she is so smart and so intelligent in how she approaches these things. I would say inspired, but she just gave me my space. And a few months later, in the right, perfect time, she brought that up, and she invited me to read this book. She said, I want to invite you. I want you to read this book. And I said, I will do that for you. I read that book, and I knew at the end of that book that I needed to get really serious about this. And so you do what you do, and you make these important decisions. And it was a recurring theme here where, like, that was not logical. I was scared what that would mean to my other children. I was scared what that could mean to me. I had seen and heard all these horror stories. It was not logical. But in my heart of hearts and in my very quiet moments, when I was willing to be humble and listen, I knew it was what I was supposed to do. And so we went for it. we started the classes. It took us about a year to get through all of the classes because it was in the evenings and I was still traveling a fair amount. And if you miss a class, it's like 3 months later, they do it again. And it seriously took us 12 months to get all the way through it. We got through the classes. All throughout the classes, they're saying, thank you so much for being willing to do this. There are so many kids out there. We need help right now. We got done in November. We thought we'll have our placement. We'll have a child in our home by Christmas. And it was radio silence. Silence in January, February, March, April goes by, not a single call. And I'm like, this is great. Like, I did what I was supposed to, and they don't need us, right? We're good. Yeah, we're good. May goes by, June. Andrea calls them, says, hey, just wanted to check in, see how you guys are doing. You know, we're still here. We're ready to foster if you need us. And they look it up and they're like, oh my heck, we didn't realize you guys were approved and ready. Like, we got to get on this right now. And so we immediately started getting calls. And right about that time, our 2 little girls' mom was driving from California on her way home to Colorado. She fell asleep on the freeway. She wrecked. The police came. They found a situation that required her to go to jail. And these 2 little girls were now needing a home. They called us and they said, we only need you for 2 days, maybe a week at the most. We're going to find family in Colorado. We are going to also transfer them to Colorado if we can't find family. She's from Colorado. And we said, great. And they came, and 2 weeks turned into 2 months. 8 months and 10 months, and here we are today. And I had shared that Jessica, our little girl's mom, had just recently asked us if we would adopt them. And I'm telling you, when you allow yourself to get caught up in a cause bigger than yourself, you will witness miracles. And it is nothing short of a miracle now that we have these 2 little girls. And I know that it was guided. I know it was because we were willing to put ourselves out there in a way uncomfortable way. And guess what? It's super hard. Like, it's not easy, you know, but it's the right thing. And I love it. And I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I love how you've told these stories too, because like anybody that's listening, that's not in the studio, you don't see the humble Brady sitting before us. Like, he's telling us all of these stories, and it's not in any way like, look what I've done, look what we're doing, look at how awesome we are and how generous we are. This is like from a place of just pure love, of wanting to do the right thing, following those promptings.
I appreciate you saying that, and I've felt so strongly about this because I've seen this and witnessed this. Though I believe that most individuals, right? So use the example of adoption. I believe that many families, like most families, if somebody came to them with a baby and said, I can't take care of this child anymore, will you be their parents? I believe most families would do that. I believe it, right?
Yeah.
That they would feel it and they would follow through with that, and that they would commit to that. The challenge is that's not how it works most of the time. That there are thousands of children right now in orphanages, in foster care, that need a family. But the way that you find out if you're supposed to go adopt one of them is not by a mom bringing a child to you, right? It really comes down to just listening in those very quiet moments. And I'm referencing just adoption. Well, guess what? There's a lot of other things that we can do, that we can go and be a part of. You guys doing this podcast right here, this is a perfect example of somebody following something that gets them way out of their comfort zone, that they're not sure if it's going to work or if anybody's going to listen, but they do it anyways. And guess what? Miracles happen, right? That's a perfect example of how that works. And so it's out there for all of us.
I love it. I preach, Brady Murray, preach.
Yeah, I'm inspired by Brady for sure. You've just listened to your heart. You've listened to a higher power, it sounds like, throughout your life, and listened to your wife.
Yeah.
You know, our wives teach us a lot about how to be gentlemen, right? And if anyone's a gentleman, you are, Brady. I'm here to tell you, you've done some amazing things. Talk to us about some of the things that your wife has taught you about being a gentleman.
This is probably not one that, this is not an easy one for me to talk about. And in fact, I'll be honest, I have never publicly shared this, but I feel like I should share this. Our oldest daughter, she's 15 now, and it was a couple of years ago. Bryn was just being what she would normally be as a 13-year-old girl, right? And as her dad, I was very clear with her around my expectations, and I was very hard on her when she was making poor decisions, and not poor decisions like, hey, we're sending you to boarding school, but like we have very high expectations for our kids, and she was making decisions that weren't meeting those expectations. And I was very stern with Bryn, and it was an emotional evening, and Andrea pulled me aside that evening. This was after Brindley had gone to bed, and she looked at me in like the most caring, loving way, but was so firm. And she said, Brady, do you want her future husband, to talk to her like that? And it crushed me. It absolutely crushed me, because the answer was no. I want her future husband to treat her like a princess and to care for her, and when she falls down, to pick her up, and to be able to simply be kind and loving to her, no matter what, in all scenarios, even when emotion is involved. And I was not doing that. And I was setting the expectation for what a husband or a father should be like. And it crushed me. And so I can't say I'm perfect by any means, but Andrea has a way to help me to see areas in which I can improve and do better. And I'm very, very thankful for that experience, although very difficult to be able to go through.
I have to say that Brady and I had talked about this before, and he had been nice enough to share with me this story before, and it changed me, Brady. It changed my relationship with all my kids. My wife looks at the world differently. So thank you to your wife for having the insight to look at the world that way, and to ask I've continued since we talked last to think about that, and treating my daughters like I would want their husband to treat them. Yeah. Game changer. And I don't know why it's but just seeing the world through a different lens, through different glasses, makes all the difference. And I appreciate and am thankful that you shared that with me before.
Yeah. Thank you.
We all have 15-year-old daughters, by the way.
So, and I do want to put a shout out there for Bryn. She's amazing, and she is a rock star, and it was meant to be that she was our first child. And if all of the rest of my kids can be like her, we win. We win big. That's awesome. So she's amazing.
That's fantastic. So, Brady, tell us some of the things that you've been doing as a dad recently that have been really impactful. What are some of the things that you do with your kids that help build relationships? Because having 7, you're spread pretty thin. How do you find that time? What are you doing that's been impactful recently? It's funny you ask this, because just this morning, in the morning, and again, I'm such an advocate for individuals getting up early and just when nobody's around, right, and it's quiet, because that's rare in my house, and just thinking about those things that you're most grateful for, and thinking about those things that are most important to you. And just this morning, I was thinking of this, and I love to journal. I believe in writing your thoughts down, and I wrote in my journal this morning, and I had a little space at the bottom of the page. I said, things are going well, but I've got to do better with my children and find specific time to be with them individually. And it was very clear. I've had experiences, and I try and do really cool things with my kids that challenge them and do some great memory-making experiences. But I just felt this morning like those are nice, but like just have those little moments with them. And about that time when I got done, my 6-year-old Mason came walking in with his blanket,
And that was right about the time when I needed to go get on the treadmill. I love to work out as well. And so I have a certain regimen I wanted to follow, and I needed to get that workout in. And Mason walked in and I said, "Come here, Mace." And he sat on my lap and I said, "How are things going for you?" He said, "So good, Dad." And he said, "Can I read you a book?" I said, "Absolutely, buddy." And he went and got his book, and he came back and he sat down, and we read that book in lieu of the workout, right? And what a tender mercy and a reminder that, like, it's great to take the kids to Disneyland. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But just cherish and seek out those little moments with an individual each and every day. Because remember, relationships are built one-on-one, right? And there's no more important relationship than those individuals in your immediate family, your spouse and your individual children. And if you seek it out, you'll find it, right? Another principle that I learned is the thing that you desire the most, that which you desire the most in your heart, you will always get. The thing that you desire the most in your heart, you will always get. And just this morning, I knew I wanted to have more one-on-one time, and guess what? There it was.
Brady, I want to ask you what we ask all of our guests on the podcast. And, you know, based on what you have told us today and the type of gentleman that I see before me, I have a pretty good idea of this, but I want you to articulate what you think it means to be a gentleman.
I think it means to, well, if you think of gentlemen and you think of the stereotypical man or father or head of the household or what the world would portray, I don't think that's a gentleman in my mind. I believe that a gentleman is kind and is loving, is willing to sacrifice and to serve, and is selfless. I believe that a gentleman is strong and is willing to stand up for what is right, and ultimately be willing to be humble enough to take correction when it is needed, and just, again, ultimately be loving and kind. That's really what it comes down to for me.
Well, your 7 kids are lucky to have a gentleman as a father like you.
Thanks, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast, Brady, and sharing your heartfelt feelings with us. I believe that I've become a better man today because I sat here with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You always hear me say, the person you become is determined by the books you read and the people you surround yourself with. And I feel likewise. I'm thankful to have got to associate with you guys today, and I look forward to further association.
I'm going to spend a lot of time with Brady is what that said.
I think the weather's warming up, and I think you guys are going to find yourself on a golf course here before too long.
I think we
That'll be fun. Let's do it.
All right.
Let's do it.
Thanks for joining us on the Gentleman Project podcast today. We hope you'll connect with us during the week. We hope that you have a great week. Make it a good one.